Why,
What's the matter,
hello,
Craig? Did you
Craig.
get Did you get lost on the way here?
He
Jeez.
was definitely taking his time to figure that out. Fortunately, he pushed the button correctly. Thanks, Craig. Good job. You get paid this week.
How much do we pay him?
Shh. Don't talk about it. We don't talk about what we pay.
A day.
Yeah.
I'm Grumpy Dungeon Master Christopher. This is Grumpy Dungeon Master Jay.
Hello.
And Grumpy Dungeon Master James.
I'm far too peppy to be a grumpy dungeon master, but I am
Me too.
here.
Yep.
James, how do you say your last name? Because I've heard it said 1,000 different ways.
You and everyone else who's ever tried to call me by my full name. My name's James Haeck.
Hey,
Yes, I got it right.
Yep,
it's very simple.
It
Yeah.
rhymes with cake, and that's how I remember it.
I got it right because I have two friends whose last names are Haecker.
There you go.
And it's spelled the exact same way, just with the ER at the end.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
Well, I'm very glad to have you on. You were on my short list of people to get on the podcast, and we've been doing this for almost 3 years. We've had some amazing guests on.
That
But
long?
like I said,
my lord.
You have been on my short list for a while. Specifically, you've been on my short list since your days writing for D&D Beyond. I guess you were a lead article writer. What was your title there at the time?
I was the lead writer at D&D Beyond. Yeah, must have been from like 2018 and right before the pandemic got us in 2020.
Okay. So I first heard your name via a posting you made about Strahd Must Die Tonight, where you play through Ravenloft in a single night. And since I saw that posting, and since we've pretty much started playing or doing Grumpy Dungeon Masters and doing our live play, I have done Strahd Must Die Tonight as an October one shot every year, and they haven't succeeded yet. They're getting really close. You're right up. If you just Google Strahd Must Die Tonight, for those out there, it'll pop up immediately. And I actually did an online YouTube review of it. Okay. And my YouTube channel is very small, and I had at this point in time not really made the connection who you are yet, and I think I struggled with your name. Okay,
Let's be honest. You struggle with everyone's name.
that's true. And then I think I made the offhanded comment trying to be funny. I don't know who he is, and I have one comment on the video, and I'll read you the comment out. It's from Ronnie J. Dio 9411, and he says, "The writer mentioned at the start has helped write all of D&D 5e. Hard pass."
Hard pass. That's fantastic. Well, he's wrong for one.
I think the hard pass is more towards me, not towards. I think it's more towards me not knowing who you were.
Oh. I don't know. I've encountered my fair share of 5e haters in the day, to which I say, fair enough. Go play a system you love. Don't torture yourself.
Exactly.
And that's what we preach here. I, however, love 5e, and I absolutely love Dragon Heist. I'm on essentially my third run through it. I've done it for Adventures League. I ran it at my table before we streamed it once. I streamed it once. I then modified one of the stories. I think it was Summer, and I did Fiendish Summer, basically following the same beats, but it was the same story. And I'm kind of running it a third time right now. And at Adventures League at my local gaming store, my other co-DM down there is running Dragon Heist for everybody. So
fantastic.
It has definitely been something that I've run so many times, and I honestly love it. I like Waterdeep as a setting. I love Xanathar. I actually just bought the premium Xanathar model and put it together.
Yes.
Moments before the stream started.
He can't stop talking about it.
Well, I'm so glad that you're loving Dragon Heist. I mean, that was the first hardcover that I worked on with Chris Perkins and the Wizards of the Coast crew. The Xanathar segment and the Castellanter segments, the Devilish Summer, are the two that I handled. In addition
Awesome.
to early chapters like Finding Floon and Troll Skull Alley and the explosion within Troll Skull. So all of that, all of the early half of that adventure and those two villains in particular are very near and dear to my heart, just because of, it's the first time I ever interacted with the RPG creative process at that level, of working within the Wizard system.
Like I said, it definitely is very near and dear to me. I love the whole part. I am the fireball scene alone, like that, just bringing that up during the session, like the first time it happened, it just brought so many shocks and awes around the table. Like, oh my god,
Hmm.
someone just got like killed somebody or something bad happened, and when they suddenly kind of piece together exactly why the fireball happened and who basically funded the fireball to happen and the reasons why, depending on the season, it just it worked out so well. It flows so well, and I honestly can't say so many good things about it because, like I said, I love the module and it works so great. And like, there's not a little bit of it that I can't just pick up and start running right now for somebody and get them just like engrossed in Waterdeep.
Oh, you're very kind to say it. That fireball scene is it's an experience that I had for the very first time of finding a book with a very strong outline from the very beginning, because that's how these big hardcovers start, from a very clear outline that someone that a master of the craft like Chris Perkins will create at the beginning and then start divvying out to their writing team. Um, and it was a moment where I discovered that this outline, as clear and complete as it was not immutable, because that fireball was originally supposed to just kind of happen near the characters in a crowded market. Wasn't really specified where, but while I was writing, it's a back and forth with your lead, going like, "Hey, I think this would be super impactful if it happened like in a shop 5 doors down from the player's house in Troll Skull Alley." And Chris said, "Oh, I love it. Go for it. Just do it. We'll see how it works." And it worked out. I mean, that's such a big stinking scene, as you
Yeah.
know.
It just shifts the whole story, and just like sets the tone. It's the very big call to action, because like
Hmm.
you get in there, you set up everything, and you have your little business and you run it for like a session or two, and people are like, "Oh, everything's going great. I wonder what's gonna happen next." Kaboom! Like, okay, you started off great.
Yeah. Hmm.
I The second time I ran it through, essentially I played through with one group, and I left that as like the canon story that was happening, and then I
Hmm.
moved straight on to the Fiendish Summer part for my stream, and I kind of kept that going, and I had another not fireball. I had to change the fireball event to something else,
Hmm.
so I had it basically be, and the timing was just perfect for this, where it was one of the Dragons Down parade, where they basically
Hmm.
make these giant paper mache dragons and like parade them through the street. And the business that they were in was basically in charge of making the red dragon, and the owner basically smuggled in some like really powerful um, glyphs that would basically trigger and make dragon's breath basically shoot out real big. And that was supposed to be the big burning of the red dragon to become the lich. And what happened was is the bad guys kind of like you know mess with the spell, so when it went off it basically burned down a big portion of Docksides, not the, I mean Dock Ward,
Hmm.
and basically at that point in time the fireball incident with this glyph of Dragon's Breath incident, we're outlawing fire spells in all of Waterdeep. You can't have fire spells anymore. And the look on my wife's face, just like, oh, I wanted to cast fireball.
I hope she was 4th level at the time, so just not quite there, but almost there.
I think that's entirely plausible, actually, at that point in that story.
So yeah, I've run it so many times, and like I said, I really do like it. But what other books did you work on for Wizards?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, thanks for telling that Dragon Heist story. It's one of my favorite things to hear, is people telling their stories of the adventures that I've had a hand in creating, because these stories always take such wild turns from what I expected while I was working on them, and that to me is the joy of D&D. Because, like,
Yeah.
I can write a decent story. I like to think that well of myself, but it's nothing compared to the screwball creativity of a group of players at the table, and then also intense lore nerds who will deep dive into the minutia of Waterdeep and pull out, political machinations that are deeper than anything we could have created in the process of making that book. So it fills my heart with a great deal of joy.
That to a point to that. Um, I had a bunch of drow escape the city for a
Mm.
number of reasons, very specific to the story, and I basically did a quick, search on the Faerun wiki, but to basically find, okay, what
Hmm.
bars would I have access to the Underdark, and I found one. It was like the Mermaid's Blush or the Mermaid's Tear or something like
Mm.
that, and she's like, yeah, that's great. Let's go there. That's where they met. That's my wife showed up with her drow character and met with the other drow that are there. They escaped, and she said, I'll follow you soon. And then after the session, literally right after the session, she comes up to me and goes, by the way, that mermaid's place, yeah, that's actually run by an elder lich. So I don't know if you want to bring that into the story at all. I was like, well, how did you know that? She's like, it's in a book that I read.
Yeah,
All right.
yep. There's plenty of lore nerds out there. I will be completely honest. Like I don't run modules usually. I run homebrew stuff, and
Mhm.
it is specifically because of lore nerds.
Yeah.
Because if I make my own world, nobody can outlore me on it because it's my own world.
You're so right for that, honestly. If I'm not running my own thing, I'm taking a module and I am knocking it into a shape unrecognizable from its original form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a table being played where like someone's like, no, it happens this way, and you're like, I am James Haeck.
Yeah.
I wrote this. This is how it goes.
I have been lucky enough to play with players respectful enough to have never pulled that garbage on me before.
That's good.
I have had plenty of problem players before, but none who have ever been of that particular flavor.
try to try to one up the lore.
Right.
Xanathar's purple. No, he's not. He's blue. I was like, yeah, it is.
Shut.
But I wrote it.
But owlbears are purple. No, they're not. No, they're not.
I'm not that much of a lore master myself. When it comes to the Forgotten Realms, there's 40 years of it,
Yeah.
and I trust if I ever have a question, uh, and when it comes to me, questions are asked early and often, ranging from huge picture to the most minute details. Uh, Someone will know, or if they don't know, they'll know where to find it, and that will all get resolved. But ultimately, that's kind of the beauty of the Forgotten Realms, is that it's vast enough and it's filled with so many individual genres that it can really handle any flavor of story. And I say the beautiful thing because that's my opinion, but I have seen a million people who dislike the realms for that exact reason too.
Hmm.
Um, and that's the way it goes. We make the realms for one reason, and if you don't like that reason, then I don't want to. No one's forcing you to play. We must all find the games which we love and the settings which we love, and the joy of RPGs is if we can handcraft the realms and the stories and the characters to near exactly what our own taste is.
We are
Oh
pretty
yeah.
adamant believers in, as the game master, run run what you're going to enjoy, run it your way.
Yes.
If you don't like how something is written, don't use it.
Yeah.
Do it your own way, because you're the game master. That's what your job is.
Yes, absolutely. And when it comes to being a player, you've gotta involve yourself in that story too. And the better the rapport is out of game, honestly, between you and your DM, the better and more smoothly and more imaginatively things will flow in game as well.
Yeah, it's definitely best to play with people. Like I prefer playing with good close friends. But even
Agreed.
if even if you're just picking up people to play a game with, it still helps having people who want to be involved in it, who want to help further whatever story is being told. Uh,
Absolutely.
like we've all had problem players who just don't want to interact properly, and it's frustrating.
And it cuts both ways. You know, the GM is obligated to uh, engage the players on their own terms as well. So
Sure.
it's all a good balancing act.
Yep.
I tell you what, though, there's nothing more fun than to teach the newbie rogue not to break and defile the statue of Bahamut and summoning an
Mm.
adult gold dragon behind him. I mean, there's a look on the face that you just can't get anywhere else.
Yes, yes. Amidst all this beautiful collaboration, there must be some abject terror as well. That is the DM's creed. Oh, yes.
So James, have you seen any of Ed Greenwood's stuff that he's been putting up on YouTube recently?
No, I can't say I have.
I
These
highly recommend following
highly
him on
recommend. He's
YouTube.
been expanding and kind of like filling in the gaps of some of the Faerun lore. And I know there's
Mm.
like a lot of like NDAs still in place. Like he's even squirrelish on a couple of topics. But it's very interesting to hear basically like him kind of like craft up a story and like try to breathe life into an area like what is Baldur's Gate, and then like to kind of like hear his side of things, and then also read the side of things like with the set into Avernus and
Mhm.
how Baldur's Gate worked there. Um,
Oh boy, I I don't know how much I should get into this, but I was involved. I was involved in the production of Descent into Avernus, kind of at the last minute.
uh-huh.
Uh, a colleague at Wizards phoned me, and I was involved in the final chapter of that, where you confront Ariel and save Elturel, and either get an ending of some manner of goodness,
Hmm.
depending on how you do it, and. I I'm consistently frustrated with the involvement of Baldur's Gate in that adventure because,
Hmm.
by my limited understanding, that was not always the case, and it was more of an inclusion to tie in with the announcement of the Baldur's Gate 3 video game, and
uh,
I don't necessarily mind that, but for something like that to happen, and you may feel as though. You may feel, as I do, that the Baldur's Gate segments of those adventures are sort of unnecessary, or shoehorned in, or something like that. And I feel perhaps they were, because and for what? For a game that wouldn't come out for another 3-4 years?
yeah, it's still
Still,
not out.
still not out.
Yeah, this summer. I'm excited. I'm super excited for
Yeah,
Baldur's Gate 3. Don't
yeah.
get me wrong.
We have plans on streaming it. We typically stream video games Mondays and
Oh yeah.
Tuesdays, and I mean I played it when it first released, and just played through what was available. I've just been sitting here waiting patiently to actually play the whole thing.
Yes. Well, I have avoided early access like the plague. One, because I've got a million other games to play, but two, because I don't want to give myself an incomplete first impression of the game. I
Yes.
love being sort of dazzled and immersed by a brand new video game, and by God, I'm going to give myself the best opportunity to let BG3 do that.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I did play the early access for it. I hadn't played Divinity: Original Sin, the
Hmm.
other games that company made at
Mm-hmm.
all. So playing that game for the first time was very like, oh, this is almost perfect. There's a couple
Hmm.
issues, quote unquote, here and there, but nothing
Hmm.
that like would detract from the fun of the game. And then going back and actually playing Divinity on
Hmm.
stream with Jay and a bunch of our friends, like, oh my god, it's like this is the D&D, video game experience here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Jake.
like the asshole wizard blowing everybody up with corpse explosion.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Our friend Jacob was just bitching about it yesterday or a couple days ago.
So I can't wait for Baldur's Gate 3 and to basically play it and do the same thing and be like, oh, you guys talking over there? Well, I'm in a fight over here. I'm about to die, so you have to come save me now. I can't. I can't wait.
Stop picking
Um,
fights. You can't win.
I just the game does D&D well, and again I can't wait for it. And the weird part is too is like you said I could have, my guess was is that the Baldur's Gate descended to Avernus was kind of for the video game. But it missed the mark. It came out way too early, and then the game was delayed. And then you had the Magic the Gathering set, okay, which is even more tied into the game because they have the actual like characters from the game in that Magic the Gathering set, and then it's still not out. Like,
well, it's a risk you run when you're a big interconnected entity that has timetables, and then someone delays the game, and all the timetables like they can't shift because we don't have another Magic set ready. So it's an enormous machine, and this is kind of where my dichotomy within indie versus Wizards RPGs really comes into play, because I truly love both. Right, I love D&D. And I have my own issues with Wizards as a business entity, but I love the creative people working on the game. And I also have tons of friends and colleagues working in very, very indie spaces, ranging from companies of 20 people all the way down to, solo creators working on their off hours in their bedroom and producing just, beautiful, amazing stuff despite it. And the simple fact of the matter to me is that you're going to get different things no matter what kind of company you support. And it's important, as someone who loves RPGs, to explore all roads and see what those different roads have to offer you. Because man, if I'd stuck only playing D&D, I would have been limiting myself from a huge, exciting world of indie RPGs out there. And if I'd never played D&D, then I would have been limiting myself from a huge, exciting world of people who are all able to speak the same language, so to speak, of an enormous community of D&D fans that have things that they love to, chat about amicably, to bicker about, to be grumpy about, there's beauty in all of it.
What, if you don't mind me asking, what other tabletop games have you been playing or played?
Yeah, I'm huge into Blades in the Dark right now.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar with that one. We talked about the sort of hubbub with the Atlas Obscura kind of. Apparently, Atlas Obscura borrowed from Blades in the Dark. They even give props to Blades in the Dark.
Well, it goes beyond that. So we're talking about Critical Role's Candela Obscura game.
Yes.
Right. And not only do they give special thanks to John Harper, the guy who made Blades in the Dark in the game, there are also people who made Blades in the Dark who made Candela Obscura too.
Oh, okay. So it's even more interconnected that I was not aware. But like the internet does, people like to complain about things, and
people like to get fussy.
Yeah. Start issues where there aren't any. So.
But the team that I hate did something that I can pick on them about, so I think I'm going to make a stink online about it, unsupported by real evidence. Well, I think that the team that I love did no wrong, and I can't be bothered to find evidence, so we'll just shout each other fruitlessly. Oh my! That's why I'm not on Twitter anymore. Yeah.
I mean, that didn't change. That's been Twitter for a decade now. So
yeah, we've just reached our limits, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, speaking of other games, it's impossible to play other games and not be influenced by it.
Yes.
Yep. Every time I either create something for my home D&D game, or for something I'm creating with Wizards, or with Critical Role, or with Ghostfire Gaming, then I bring that experience with me. And it's not even just RPGs. A Call of the Netherdeep, the adventure helmed by Matt Mercer and myself and published by Wizards in the Critical Role setting, had a huge influence from a game that I played and loved over the pandemic, Persona 5. And I think if you didn't know that, you wouldn't recognize it, right? Because the aesthetic similarities simply do not exist, right? Persona 5 is about playing as Japanese high schoolers in Tokyo, and hanging out with your friends.
Getting a part-time job.
Yeah, right, exactly. But Call of the Netherdeep, its final dungeon, and spoilers if that is the sort of thing that bothers you, but its final dungeon involves kind of delving into the psyche of the villain who has created this sort of cognitive distortion within this sort of extraplanar realm that he is now master of, and you have to unwind that sort of the dungeon itself is a character study of the villain, and you can really explore all the things about him. That was inspired by the ending of Descend to Avernus too, because I love the character of Zariel, and perhaps as a reaction to some of her story, at least to my perspective, being winnowed away to make room for Baldur's Gate stuff, I was like, yeah, but what if we had this sort of fallen hero and we really got into the sort of the beauty and the pain and the redemption or eternal damnation of that character. And so in some ways, the stuff that I thought Avernus lacked made its way into Netherdeep.
That's awesome. Like I never even thought of it from that perspective before, having a dungeon be like a psyche journey into someone's problems.
It can get pretentious fast if you're not careful about it.
Yeah.
And even when you're careful about it, sometimes it gets kind of pretentious. But I love the idea, and I'm not afraid to be a little pretentious sometimes.
It's a very creative idea that I can't say I've seen done, and I've been tabletoping a very long time.
Yeah, like I've been putting together a dungeon for I run a D&D tournament every year in July, so I throw together a new dungeon for it, and I'm struggling to come up with ideas for like the second half of the dungeon, and then you come up here with this amazing idea about delving into the villain's psyche. We've talked about that a lot too, where you just borrow ideas from other things, and how a lot of what already exists out there is kind of already done, but just put enough of your own spin on it, and you can make your thing what you want it to be.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure my players didn't know that they were running Dragon Heist, when I was running my second run through it, or even going to be the third run through it. But it is very creative seeing it, just hearing what leads to something else. Outside of Baldur's Gate and Dragon Heist, do you work on any other books for Wizards?
Yeah, I've been involved in a lot of stuff for Wizards, on and off. Baldur's Gate, yes, I came in for the end of it. Dragon Heist was my first. I've done some stuff with the Adventurers League in season 7, which was tied to Tomb of Annihilation. There was Netherdeep, of course, and Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, another Critical Role collaboration. And there have been a number of projects I've worked on that, for reasons kind of outside of anyone's control, never ever saw the light of day. Some of which I'm quite sad about.
Does that happen a
But
lot? Sorry to interrupt, but does that happen a lot in the industry?
yes and no. When you're a company like Wizards, you can afford to axe a project, especially if it's a small one or it's early in the game, and they'll do it for a million reasons. It could just be market reasons. Typically, it's market reasons. Sometimes it's timeline. Sometimes it's too similar to something that has come out recently, and you're worried that people will react poorly to it. Or sometimes, their strategy has moved in different direction. I mean, there's a million reasons.
Yeah. Okay.
Typically, when you're a smaller company, if you're, say, Kobold Press or Ghostfire Gaming, or honestly, even like Paizo, it becomes prohibitive to cancel projects like this, especially when basically every previous project is funding the one after it. So yeah, it depends a lot on who you are and what your sort of like place on the totem pole is.
Yep.
Because I was wondering about that, because I've been doing some work on some follow-ups to stuff that I put out at DM's Guild, and I didn't like how the content turned out, and I pretty much have just shelved it in my mind.
Right.
Every once in a while I go back and I kind of work on it, but again, I don't make a living off of the stuff on DM's Guild. Stuff you have to break into the professional writing bubble.
Right.
But so I was actually always been very curious whether or not they will just like cancel a book altogether. Like there was always like things on the docket, like things on a timeline, and always like rumors out there. It's like, oh, they're gonna do a Dark Sun this year, I promise, and then it never happens.
It's never gonna happen. Never gonna happen.
But like I think Planescape was a book that they're coming out with. Like they didn't think they were, but now there definitely are, and there's artwork coming around. So that's Wizards giant corporation perspective. with Critical Role, I know you have like the 2 books through Wizards, and you have a number of other books that aren't
Yes.
Wizard specific. What's the
Yeah.
process different like for that?
Well, it's a very different process working with anyone that isn't Wizards of the Coast. It really varies company over company, for a lot of different reasons. Critical Role, I love working with them. Uh, Working with Matt Mercer is always a delight because he is absolutely the same person off camera that he is on camera. He's just so he's kind and creative and super collaborative and also just so passionate about the worlds he creates and so eager to help people find themselves within those worlds. He's just a treasure. I'm very blessed to know him. And so, working on the Tal'Dorei campaign guide back in 2017, it was one of the biggest things I'd worked on,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
the biggest thing I'd worked on at that point.
yeah. Sorry, going from writing quote unquote modules to writing a whole campaign, that is a whole other world.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was only in that position because I was interning at Geek and Sundry, then the producers of Critical Role at the
Hmm.
time, before they became their own institution. And it was just, it was just a sort of wild happenstance. Matt, knew that I was the guy who wrote D&D articles for the Geek and Sundry website, and he was like, "I can't write this book on my own. Let's come do this." And I'm like, "Yes, of course." And then 5 years later, after so much like experience in the industry, learning how to write well, how to develop an IP well, how to match someone's writing style well, uh, being able to return to that and create the Tal'Dorei campaign setting reborn book, kind of out of the bones, and then plus another 100% basically of what was in that original book. I mean, it's just a dream come true.
Yeah. It seems like it would have been an incredible amount of work. How long did you work on it? Do you
It was
remember?
a very fast process. Yeah, I got a call in January of 2021, and the work on that was finished in May of 2021.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
real quick.
Yeah, I mean, like, we were lucky to have basically half the book done, but it was intended to be just a really quick job. It was add some new art and update the timeline, right? Because this was set in campaign 1 of Critical Role. We wanted to set it concurrent with campaign 2 of Critical Role, so some things would need to be updated to fit that, and maybe add like another 10,000 words. And we doubled the size of the book by the end of it. So uh if that was my fault, if it was my co-lead's fault, if it was our producer's fault for not reining us in, who knows. But the thing that was true is that we were very passionate about that book, and we wanted to make it the best it could possibly be, and I think we did.
Yeah, and there are so many fans of Critical Role in general who love that setting.
Hmm.
So yeah, like getting more of that setting is not really going to be a bad thing.
No one will complain about that for sure. I really love working within IPs like that. I'm working on. I can't talk about it, but I'm working on a project that is involved in someone else's IP right now. And working for Wizards is working in someone else's IP. Even
Yep.
working for Ghostfire, who has Grim Hollow as a campaign setting, and the Aetherial Expanse, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Yes,
That's
we will.
working. That's working in a sandbox that someone has created. And the question is, was it created a year ago? In the case of Ghostfire and Grim Hollow, was it created 5 years ago in the case of Critical Role, or was it created 40 years ago in the case of Forgotten Realms? How much sediment has built up over time? How important is it to cleave to the original author's voice, right? In the
Mhm.
case of Tal'Dorei, uh, matching Matt Mercer's authorial voice was vital. It was unthinkable that I would put too much of my own self into it. And inevitably I did, but I that's part of the editing process, right? Is to unify the voices.
Yeah.
But the Forgotten Realms, you know, uh, that setting has held so many stories and so many voices, and on top of that, Ed Greenwood's voices and R.A. Salvatore's voice are so incredibly distinctive that it feels wrong somehow to try and ape it, right?
Yeah.
They are storytellers among many, and we kind of have the opportunity to involve ourselves in that world.
Yeah, and at the same time, when you come into something like Forgotten Realms that has been around for 40 years, you are
Mhm.
dealing with a incredible amount of lore that's already built
Yes.
up. Because I can't even tell you how many novels set in Forgotten Realms that I own, let alone all of the ones that are still out there. And like just trying to pull something, like you almost have to work in a smaller space within that setting. Like
Mm.
you're trying to encompass, things that have already happened or anything is just going to be nearly impossible because of the age and all that's happened there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like with
And,
sorry, but yeah, with Taldore, it's much newer. There's a lot less to worry about as far as that goes, at least.
and that's getting less true all the time, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Critical Role just celebrated their 8th anniversary. It's gonna be 10 before you know it. And there have been campaigns on Tal'Dorei and Wildemount and Marquette. There have been books published. There's gonna be, there's so much. And there's been decades of time in between these campaigns. There's been, campaign 1, and then 20 years later is campaign 2, and I think it's something like 5 or 10 years later is campaign 3. They have so many stories to tell, and they keep very good track of the stories they do tell because they've seen from experience what happens when you lose track of the lore, right? The integrity of the world starts to slip. The artifice starts to show, and it's incredibly important for artists to do two things. And one is to immerse the audience. Don't let the artifice show. Make it as real and tangible a world as you can. Keep the audience as invested emotionally as they can be. But on the other hand, I do think that we have a duty to having to have some levity, to acknowledge the artifice a little bit, and create stories that can be stories. Because at the end of the day, we all know a story is a story when it's being told. We've known that since 3,000 years ago when we told stories around the communal fire and caves. Uh, but it only needs to be real enough for us to believe in it for a little bit. I see fandoms like Star Wars, for example, that get really tied up in the minutia and canonicity and consistency of all these stories, such to the point that you miss what the original point of the story was in the first place. Star Wars, uh, I think is a great story, but it's also a pastiche of Flash Gordon and other sci-fi B movies
Yeah.
of the 40s and the 50s.
I was
Uh,
listening to the Queen soundtrack just this week from the from
yeah.
the 70s or 80s. I think it was 1980. When that,
Hmm.
Listen, when Holdo did her lightspeed maneuver and broke the cannon, I didn't care. I thought it was an amazing spectacle, and I went, "Wow,
Yeah.
that's so cool! Why doesn't everybody do this?" I didn't care that there was the dampeners and had to go back and make up reasons why it
Yeah.
didn't normally happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess when it comes to Star Wars, I'm kind of lucky because the only things that are canon to me are the movies.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know there's so much more beyond that, but I just focus on that because that's really kind of what it was always intended to be, was films.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Uh, and truly, the way of the infinite tie-in novels, that way lies madness. There's so many Forgotten Realms
Yeah.
novels. There's so many expanded universe Star Wars novels. Critical Role is even publishing novels now, and comic books and stuff like that. It's just
Wow.
like,
Yep.
I will enjoy those, but uh, to obsess over it, I think that kind of defeats the purpose
Yeah.
of enjoying the story as it's being told. You want stories to stay with you, but you also need to let them go a little bit.
That's why I'll never run a Drow campaign for my wife because she's read every single R.A. Salvatore book
Mm,
back and
Uh-huh.
forth 5 times.
mm,
Read all the other lore snippets and everything, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna touch this with a 10-foot pole. I may hint at it, and I'll let her fill in the blanks live on stream,
mm,
but I ain't gonna.
mhm.
Yep.
I don't want to get one thing wrong. They ever come back to me like, the drows don't do that. I don't know if they don't do that. Don't hit me.
Yeah, Chris, can I get you to run a Dragonlance campaign for me?
No, you cannot.
Dragonlance is sort of my baby, so.
Yeah. That's actually one of the reasons why I haven't gotten a Critical Role yet, is because a lot of people love it. But I focused just on running 5e and learning as much as I can about 5e, more the Forgotten Coast or the Sword Coast than anything else. And just so I can run Adventure League games more consistently and better for my local gaming stores, and to kind of fill in the blanks with if I write my own stuff. That's so I just kind of drilled down to learning everything I can about that area of the world. But then like it kind of see like Critical Role out there, and some people really want to play it, or they want to try it. And like, I can't tell you a single thing about it other than Matt Mercer's involved. So like, if you want to get the book and sit down and you read it, I'll play the game in it, and then you can tell me, and then you can run the game. So I've run out of time to learn more settings.
It really is true that a game is going to be better if the DM knows the setting exceedingly well. So for Chris to try to pick up the Tal'Dorei campaign, like, you have to read the entirety of the book. You have to understand the setting, and it's a lot of work.
Well, I wonder about that often as someone who's written both adventures and settings, because, Wizards of the Coast sells starter sets by the thousands every day, and those are set in the Forgotten Realms, and they make sort of a cursory explanation of what the realms are, but they, really what they do is they dig into the town of Phandalin. They focus on, this is what's going on in Phandalin. This is who these characters are. These are some of the factions, and they have their own involvement in the broader world, but this is what they're doing here in this town. And there's a city called Neverwinter far off in the distance, but you don't need to know about that right now. You can explore that if you want to.
Yeah, that's kind of what the modules are for. Like the Tal'Dorei campaign setting it's all the information about Tal'Dorei, whereas the Waterdeep Dragon Heist, it's very specific. It's all localized. It's got everything. So, trying to run Tal'Dorei, if Chris had a module like that from Tal'Dorei, it wouldn't be an issue. But trying to just create his own campaign in that setting would be difficult.
This is one of my favorite things about the Tal'Dorei guide, actually. And we did the same thing in the Wildmount guide. And honestly, I want to do it in every setting guide I ever make, is that within the Gazetteer portion of the book, where we go region by region and we tackle locations, big and small, from the size of the city down to the smallest village or a distant copse of trees, right? Every location, I think with only a few exceptions, gets one or more plot hooks. And these plot hooks are only about a paragraph long.
I love it.
Often they aren't any more specific than they're for, tier 1, 2, 3, or 4. They might not even specify what monster you use. They might not even really lay out a full and cohesive plot. They might just ask a question or something like that. But it is enough to get a GM who's been engrossing themselves in the setting to start thinking in terms not just of encyclopedic detail, but in terms of stories. What stories can be told here? Because ultimately, that's my goal. All of D&D is storytelling, and anything I can do to get people who are not, trained writers or something like that to think in terms of stories. That's what I want them to do. Here, let me read you an excerpt from Tal'Dorei Reborn that focuses on this. This is a section of the region of the Dividing Plains called the Bramblewood. It's sort of a haunted forest known for its jagged and thorny barked trees. And even without knowing any more information than that, I'll delve into these plot hooks. Here's one, Haunted Road. It's for mid-level characters. And it says this: local folklore speaks of a spectral young woman sometimes appearing along the road through the forest, sobbing and leading men deeper into the Bramblewood to never be seen again. While these tales are generally considered childish ghost stories, a mining crew was recently found dead near the fabled spot, unwounded and with looks of terror stretched across their lifeless faces. A banshee, aided by the specters of those she has slain, hungers for the sweet taste of another adventurer's dying breaths. And that's a very straightforward adventure hook, right? We lay out exactly what monsters are there, and we don't even, provide a particularly deep or emotionally heartfelt uh, resolution to this. Just like, yeah, there's some monsters here, and if you go there, you will get involved in some nastiness.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can one.
Yeah,
If I can.
that one. Sorry, that one is perfect. Like that leaves you. You can make it a very simple thing of you go in there, you find the banshee, you fight her and her minions, problem solved. Or if you really want to expand on it, you can take it as deep as you want. Why is the banshee there? How do you actually get rid of the banshee besides just killing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's another one from some nearby mountains called the Dagger Bay Mountains, and it's Eye of the Storm. It's another mid-level hook, and it says groups of hill giants are migrating into the mountains, leaving their foothill settlements empty of warriors, civilians, and the infirm alike. A half-elf scout named Thunder Chaser has caused a stir in the Emerald Outpost by bringing back the lightning-charred corpse of a hill giant with one eye ritually gouged out. What are the Cyclops Stormcallers planning beneath the concealing storm clouds of the Dagger Bay Mountains? And that's a very open question. I don't really, I don't know what the Cyclops Stormcallers are planning there. But I think that just a question like that, given a few sentences of setup, excuse me, will be more than enough for a creative and curious DM to create their own adventure based off just those 3 or 4 sentences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've recently run some third edition stuff. It was kind of third party, and the books that I was running it out of had a lot of that in there. It would have
Mhm.
detailed information about the locations, the NPCs, and then it would have a ton of plot hooks, you know, parsed throughout that you could
Mhm.
easily just grab and run something with. And I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of that.
I think it's lost to the sands of time whether it was Matt Mercer or whether it was me who decided, hey, let's do this in this book back in 2017. But I think later on we both discovered independently that we'd been inspired by a third edition Dragonlance campaign guide
Yep.
that campaign the it must have been Cam Banks had worked on that back in the third edition era, and that book was replete with plot hooks just like that.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I will always look for books that have plot hooks in it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Makes
at the
my
end of the
Well,
day, that's really all you need. Just a bunch of plot hooks, and then just
Mhm.
fill in the blanks, and
yeah. And I
you
mean,
go somewhere.
to avoid putting myself out of a job, I will say there's great merit to pre-made adventures. Don't stop wanting them. uh,
I
because yeah.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I just say, even if you change all but the smallest details, or perhaps all but the biggest details of them, like I often do when I run them, having those encounters already kind of half planned for you, having dungeons that already have maps pre-made and rooms with creatures in them, having villains, I think that's what always gets me. Having some villains who I can make my own and add greater motivation to, add some depth to. Those are the things that always spark my imagination about published modules. Uh, and I also think that, back when 5e was getting started, they had this plan for everyone to be talking about that season's adventure. And up until a certain point, maybe it was 2020, maybe it was right after Avernus, and the pandemic happened, that it all went off the rails. But for a good 5 years or more, that's really how it felt. Everyone, whenever a new adventure was coming out, they were talking about it. They were sharing their stories. They were sharing strategies on how to run particularly weird encounters in fun ways. And that was so joyous to me to see the community coming together in that way, when typically I think the D&D playing community can be a rather fractious one.
Oh yeah, yeah. I Waples can attest to this. I have run a single 5e module ever. During the pandemic, I ran Icewind Dale. Because everybody was running online, so we tried it out. And modules have never been my thing. I prefer to write my own campaign, do my own thing. But just recently, I have started playing Dungeon Crawl Classics, which I don't know if
Mm.
it's from Goodman Games. and it's much more akin to first edition D&D, but the whole thing is really and truly designed to be quickly run with modules. So I ran my first module since Icewind Dale this weekend, and it was quick, it was easy, ran smoothly. So I think for some people love modules. For me, it wasn't really my thing, but at least with Dungeon Crawl Classics, I'm almost certainly going to keep doing that. My problem, and this is a personal thing for my 5e ones, is their modules are entire books. And I come from the older school background of first and second ed, where it's much, much shorter. You get 20 or 30 pages of a module, and that's the module. So, I'm old. I haven't caught up to the times, I guess.
Yeah, you just haven't caught up to the times, because like the last book they put out was Keys of the Golden Vault, and that's
I like those. I do like.
It's not
those.
a whole book.
Yeah,
that's
fair.
what I'm currently running in AL right now is Keys. The last thing I think that the Adventures League group did was the Witchlight. They ran some like Feywild modules, and that was about it that I remember.
What are you running in Keys right now?
Oh, I'm just going. They're in the 5th adventure right now, where they got to go to the Snurfmelblin city and like save the mayor.
Oh, that's wonderful. My friend Brooks worked on that one.
Actually, my one of my players actually went to a local convention here in Charleston and got a number of people that signed up for that, and like autographed the different stories, and that was one of them. So he must have met them.
Please tell me how that one goes, because I'm very excited to hear about it. It was my friend's first published piece of D&D writing, and I looked it over a little bit. I gave some feedback on it. But I'm really curious to see how it goes for you.
Oh yeah, so I mean, I read through it, and like my initial read through of it, like it sounds a lot of fun. There's like they're gonna be bouncing around a nice big city, and they're just level 5, so they have all these new tools and stuff available to them.
Nice. Fireball.
Yeah, Fireball. I ran Prisoner 13, which that one was a lot of fun because that had the Reaper's End from Frost Maiden book, which is also in the D&D movie, and so that had a lot of tie-in. We did a big event for that at our local gaming store, and Reach for the Stars was a lot of fun. I really liked that one quite a bit. Like I said, I'm just about to do the Toxworth Clocksworth and move on from there. We have a previous writer that we talked to, Jeffrey Ludwig. He did Fire and Darkness. He's been on our podcast a few times too.
Jeffrey, I haven't had the pleasure of making his acquaintance, but if he's done something cool for Keys, I only just got the book from my friend, and so I'm starting my read through of it.
His is Fire and Darkness, and when I was looking through it and I read it, I was like, did he really use the oh crap, I forgot the name of the book. The Book of Vile Darkness, yeah.
Oh yeah.
He used the Book of Vile Darkness, and I was like, did you really use the Book of Vile Darkness in just an anthology module? He's like, yeah, I did. Great, we're gonna destroy the world now. It always has to show up at the end of an edition. I played only 4th and 5th, and so like the last book that I got in 4th was the Book of Vile Darkness, like the companion book. And so now here at the end of 5th, here it is. Here's the Book of Vile Darkness.
Yeah,
all right, this edition's over.
Yeah, the Book of Vile Darkness was one of the later 3rd edition books.
Yeah, the book itself. Yeah.
So I've been loving. There's not a single module in there that I don't think I can just sit down and run in a night. I mean, some of the later ones obviously are a little bit more difficult to do in one setting, but they're really fun, and I'm really quite enjoying them. I haven't read all the modules. I've read the first like 6 and the last 2, but they're all fantastic. Oh, I did have another question for you. While we're on topic of books for other people, did you write or help write some of the Game Master's book of, I think it was the Legendary Dragons?
Oh yes.
Oh man, what's the guy's name?
Jetpack 7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fred.
Jeff Ashworth was
Ashworth,
the
thank
guy
you.
we talked to recently on our podcast. He did the first couple, the Game Master's Guide
He did
to
the first 3 at least. Yeah.
NPCs, random encounters, and something else.
Well, I was
Um,
involved in the original Legendary Dragons with them.
okay.
Characters like Fury, Dragon Queen of Hell, the Living Spellbook, and the Demon Dragon were all my creations. That was a very fun book to work on. I just love busting out villains, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of those books. I
I
love
mean,
those
a good
books.
villain, man, he can just make or break a story, you know?
Oh yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Um, well, I can see we're coming a little close to our hour, so I want to talk really briefly about the Ethereal Expanse. I know it's something you wanted to chat
Yes.
with me about.
Oh yeah.
It's the latest big project coming out of Ghostfire Gaming, which are just a really cool Australian 5e compatible RPG producer, and they also do board games and other things like that. Um, they're known for the Grim Hollow campaign setting, which is very dark fantasy. My friend Ben compares it to The Witcher quite often.
Mhm.
There's Aurora, Age of Desolation, another campaign setting that's sort of a post-apocalyptic with a great deal of dragons and hellfire involved in that. Um, and in the midst of that, their third, and I think probably last for a while, campaign setting is the Ethereal Expanse. It's a big break from what we've been talking about mostly today, which is playing in other people's sandboxes. Because this is an IP that I created myself. It's a world that I
Ooh, okay.
started from the ground up. It was originally a setting to support one adventure. Pirates of the Aetherial Expanse is an enormous campaign-sized adventure, huge and sprawling. It's levels 3 through 13. It's something like 400 pages over the course of these 6 monthly releases is what we did. Where you play as a group of pirates sailing on the starlit seas of the astral plane to seek plunder and liberty from the forces of the Kingdom of Eris and the Caroline Empire. Both the sort of uh, these forces from worlds of material plane that have found ways to burst into the astral plane and start spreading their imperial or mercantile conquest upon the islands and asteroids and comets that are adrift within this starry sea. And
So you have
mm,
ship to ship combat rules, I'm assuming, correct?
yes, we
Yay!
do. I have had people say that Ethereal Expanse is the spelljammer they wanted, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think they're right,
Just
because
toot it, please.
yeah. One thing to note though is this is not 3D combat. One of the main goals for me of this was to really dig down into that pirate aesthetic, and that involves 2D thinking. Uh,
Mhm.
it involves having a flat plane of ocean upon which these vessels can traverse and try and outmaneuver each other. I worked with a very keen mechanical designer named Sam Mannell. He's New Zealandish. He's a wonderful guy, and he amazed me by doing aerial combat rules for an MCDM project. And I was like, Sam, I need you to
Hmm.
come over here and help me create uh, ship combat rules. And he's so thorough. He in fact, he was so thorough in his research and in things and looking deep into things that I told him about, like what do ships do when they have the weather gauge? What do they do when they cross the T of another ship? How do how do age of sail ships actually maneuver in order to blow each other up? Watch Master and Commander. Watch any film that really gets into the nitty gritty of 19th century, 18th century naval combat. And he went hard. He went deep into the actual naval tactics of this. In fact, he went so deep, I had to say, all right, Sam, you've done great, but we need to make this less rigorous, actually. This is so good. This could be it invokes the idea of some of those classic war games like Campaign for North Africa, where it's like, the Italian army needs more water rations than the Americans and the French because they boil their pasta, right? It's just so nitty gritty. And so
That might be a little too much, yeah.
it's just a little too much. Go watch Matt Colville try and play Campaign for North Africa sometime. It's pretty fun. Anyway, so he went so in depth on this, and I, in my capacity as the editor, streamlined it a little bit, brought it back in, and it's still a really crunchy, really well thought out way of having naval engagements between typically two, sometimes more vessels. And also about navigating the sea and all of those very particular things that were so important to actual sailors in the age of sail, the golden age of sail. And so on the mechanical side, there's all that. There's like tons of really dense new mechanics. And on the other side, we have this high octane fantasy story happening within this setting. To me, it's the pinnacle of what D&D wants to be. So many people talk about, I'm going to do a low magic setting. I'm going to make things really grounded and gritty because that's the kind of sort of Game of Thronesian story I want to tell. So I'm going to ban wizards, or I'm going to make wizards like persecuted, so if you play a wizard, you better be careful because the town's going to burn you at the stake. I think my very first D&D campaign was like that, which is why I get on people's cases about it, because I see it in myself. And like that's wonderful. I think that is a way to play D&D, and it puts a lot of work on you as a GM and on the players, but that's not the kind of game that D&D's rules are trying to drive you towards. Honestly, I don't think even the Forgotten Realms are the kind of game that D&D's rules are trying to drive you towards. You're looking for a combination of grueling sort of war of attrition combat, but also with huge, high energy, high magic, explosive, swashbuckling moments, right? That's what you see when you watch, say, Chris Perkins DM Acquisitions Incorporated. Pat Rothfuss is going to swing in, shirt open and skewer some fools on the way out. Well, the cleric is shooting laser beams, basically. The wizard is trying to talk down a clone that's turned evil. It's super huge B-movie stuff. And so the Aetherial Expanse really wants to lean into magic is ubiquitous, but not everyone has access to magic, but magic surrounds the world. Magic is a fundamental part of the world, and so you're always familiar with it. There's never that tension of like, there's a great wizard over there, but we are still dirt farming peasants who have never heard of a spell before. I'm like, what's going on here?
Wizards casting fireball.
Yeah, the sea itself is made of magic. The ships have magical devices that are rigged into them. People, there are creatures that rise out of the ocean that can only be explained through the involvement of magic. And so, no matter what, even though the story is very emotionally grounded, the setting has, real stakes to it. You can never truly escape the high magicness of it. And so originally this was just like, it was something like a 60-page setting guide with a big adventure attached to it. And now that adventure is out in the world, the crew at Ghostfire Gaming is returning to that original setting primer, and we're going to expand it out into a full, 200 to 300 page book in the sort of purview of the Tal'Dorei campaign guide, or Sword Coast Adventurers guide, or any sort of big setting book like that.
I love it.
Yeah,
and you're on Kickstarter right now, right?
Yes. So Aetherial Expanse is on Kickstarter right now. I think we've already blown past our funding goal, and we're deep into the stretch goals. We're very excited to dig even deeper into this book. I know I am.
I'm looking at just like the art. The art you guys have is fantastic.
Yeah.
Like I love like the I guess it's a mimic. Like
Oh, the
Mimic
mimic
Cap?
ship. Yeah.
A mimic ship? What?
Oh yeah. I don't know if we're talking about the same piece, but there's this great illustration in there of a ship that is itself a mimic. So this huge
Oh,
three-masted galleon that when you get close, its maw opens up and the eyes start to peer at you. Yeah.
yeah. Me and Chris both have a love for mimics, so
Mm.
I love it.
As well you should, I think.
Yeah, like I played through like the Spelljammer release, and I
Mhm.
enjoyed the adventure. The adventure was fantastic, because you could start off kind of like wherever you wanted, and it kind of just goes off there, into the astral sea, and you kind of go crazy. Fantastical things happen. They hit the rock of ball. Just make sure you hit it. That's the only place where you can really go. And then like the story ends, and now you're back at home again. So like
Mhm.
it was very fun. It's a nice like side story.
Mhm.
It's like that companion movie in a trilogy, and it was really
Mm.
great. But just there wasn't much else in the campaign guide to
Yeah.
bring everything together and keep things working. It was very just like every encounter was go to this derelict ship and you know
Mhm.
crawl through it, because there are no ship to ship combat rules, and
Mhm.
there's no like navigation rules. Everything is just you're there.
Yeah,
So
well, let me promise you this. If you look for the adventure Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse, that adventure ends in a massive ship battle against a an imperial galleon that's infused with the lightning breath of a blue dragon. Um,
mm,
while, giant dragon turtles and the might of a kraken is actually, it's not a kraken. It is a dragon turtle. It's an island-sized dragon turtle that's sort of causing mischief in the background. So huge ship combat stuff going on in Pirates, and I'm sure we'll only expand on that in the Ethereal Expanse setting guide as well.
listen, I just bought an Astral Dreadnought Mini. I need something to
Yes.
run it with.
Oh, yes. Excellent.
um, so I we want to talk about Astral Expanse, and we kind of did. I did notice that there was another setting book that you were just a part of that released here in April. Zobek Clockwork City.
Oh, yes. Yes, so I worked on that several years ago, actually. This must be Kobold Press doing stuff to build up to their big Tales of the Valiant release. Yeah, several
Okay.
several years back, I worked on the Zobek Gazetteer, an update of an older Pathfinder book to fifth edition that delves into great detail on their dark fantasy hub city of Zobek in the Midgard campaign setting, Kobold Press's home campaign
Yep.
Okay.
world. Um, Zobek is a very cool city. It's dim and dingy and beautiful and magical all at once. They very much subscribe to a dark fantasy with weirdness, right? It's not Game of Thronesian, and it's sort of like low, mucky sort of aesthetic, but it's dark fantasy with some wildness attached to it, and I quite like that. Like, for example, in Zobek, there are clockwork uh, automata, and that's kind of the city's claim to fame, is their discovery of Gearforge technology and stuff like that. Um, so being able to expand on the weird stuff of Zobek, like the were rat king that controls its sewers, or the Jinn that work within its arcane university. I mean, there's all sorts of wildness and weirdness. Though I must say, it's been something of a time since I worked on that book. I'm not sure how much I could tell you about it right now.
Well, I just like I said, I was just doing some prior research for the episode. Like I looked at recent releases, and that came out in hardcover April this year. So,
Wow.
huh.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's a great book, and I'll bet they've added some to it, especially if it's here to support their new 5e offshoot, Tales of the Valiant,
Mhm.
just because they want to have all their material kind of up to date.
Is there any other products that you're working on that you can tell us about that you're allowed to?
um, uh, yeah, so Ethereal Expanse is coming up. That's what I'm really most excited about. That's what I
Mhm.
really want to urge you to go check out. Go check out these things from Ghostfire Gaming that I'm working on now. There's Ethereal Expanse. It's on Kickstarter. And there's also our podcast, the Eldritch Lorecast, which has me, our host Ben Byrne, uh, acclaimed D&D designer Sean Merwin, and also a fantastic gaming lore mythology YouTuber Dale Kingsmill, another Aussie treasure. Uh, all on there every week. We've got good guests as well. We've had Matt Colville on a couple of times, Gabe Hicks, a whole handful of wonderful people. Eldritch Lorecast. It's the podcast I'm on every week. I'm working on one thing with Wizards right now that is a bit of an oddity. It's been announced, though I don't think it's out yet. It's only available in the United Kingdom.
Huh.
It is. I'm serving as the editor for a Partworks magazine called D&D Adventurer that is going to come out weekly on magazine stands in the UK, with the intent of introducing the British audience to learning how to play Dungeons and Dragons. And it, in a series of short articles, will tell you everything you need to know about the game's classes, about the Forgotten Realms, and even provide a new short adventure every week.
What is this called again? So I have to have it.
Yeah, check it out. This might be something of a rarity
Huh.
in years to come. It's called D&D Adventurer. It's published in partnership with Wizards of the Coast and Hachette Publishing.
And it's a magazine, you say?
It's a
Okay.
short weekly release magazine, probably about 20 to 24 pages every week.
Yeah,
The UK has a thriving magazine culture,
I know.
which I had no idea about.
I didn't know that either, but I'm glad that somebody does. I loved Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine, and
hmm
I was very sad to see that they are no longer around. So
Yeah, well, if you're looking for something the likes of Dragon and Dungeon, you won't quite find it here.
sure.
In many ways, the stuff that they're introducing to you in terms of articles is stuff that people like us already know from books like The Player's Handbook and stuff like that. But there is a brand new short adventure in every issue, and they really have quite an ambitious plan for the sort of overall story they're telling here. It's set in the Forgotten Realms, start in Phandalin, but it will really travel quite a bit. I'm excited for people to get their hands on it.
That's really cool. Yeah, I found an article on it that showed off a couple of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there were 4 issues that were released there recently, kind of as a testing the water preview before they
Mhm.
committed to the entire big run. Um, and yeah, it's been out in some test markets, and they're getting very close to full production. So we'll start releasing fairly soon, I think.
I mean, I doubt my podcast here at Grumpy Dungeon Master reaches the ears of anyone out there, but I can guarantee you that people would like that here too, because
Yeah.
I'm running Adventure League weekly. We have another guy that's running another day, and we still have tons and tons of people showing up going, I want to learn how to play D&D. Well, we'd only have so many hours in a day to kind of show,
hmm
come up and show someone how to play.
hmm
Like that would be great. Like just to go into the store and be able to buy,
hmm
for like $5, $8 or whatever. Here are the combat rules for D&D, and
hmm
uh, it's a missed opportunity. I think over here in the States, I think
Yeah, and,
it
I'm
would be
sure it has
quite cool.
something to do with, market forces or something like that. But I am really quite fond of what they've made over there. I think that
Yeah.
given a smaller audience expectation, they would
Mhm.
they would make a killing on it.
I have a couple of friends who literally just moved to the UK.
Huh.
So I'm going to have to contact them and be like, when this comes out, I need these.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Oh,
I assume it will be on magazine stands and train stations and that sort of thing.
I'm just surprised. I'm surprised and very glad to hear that somebody's still reading magazines.
Apparently, hundreds, if not thousands, of Brits are doing it every day.
Wow,
Uh,
whole thousands.
well,
Yeah.
the best part is too is like I guess the couple of first adventures come with like their own custom D&D adventurer dice.
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
that's cool. What
Yeah, there's
we
gonna
need that.
be dice. I think there might even be minis. Maybe they're paper minis, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Paper
it looks
minis
like
are
they have
fine.
at least a couple maps and whatnot. That's really
Mhm.
cool. That is awesome. And like
Yeah, and mhm.
I know like like Adventures League is usually tied in per edition. Like I did a lot of
Mhm,
D&D encounters during 4th edition,
mhm.
and now it's Adventures League. And now we're at the end of 5th. I'm hoping that Wizards has like the next iteration of that for not 6th edition.
Right.
Um, but I'm still kind of like waiting for something to happen. Like the website's not updating. I'm not seeing anything. Twitter is useless now. Reddit's gone. So I don't know where to find their data. So I'm hopefully they start some kind of marketing thing. That's my own grumpy thing. Um, but yeah, like you said, we are kind of close to the hour. Probably more than an hour and a half now, and we still have to have you tell us a grumpy story.
Oh, my
Hopefully,
grumpy
you can tell one.
story, it's that I'm grumpy with myself right now. I have
Oh,
had a D&D campaign, that I adore on hiatus for something like 6 to 9 months now,
Ooh.
and
wow.
every time I try and get back to it, something gets in the way. Sometimes I come down with a cold. Sometimes someone has to call out sick, and it's like, oh my god, we're starting up again for the first time in almost a year. It doesn't make sense to like start without everyone, so let's put it on hold another 2 weeks or like. And right now, what's getting me is I'm just getting cold feet about it. Right, I'm so in my head about this has got to be a great first session. I need to prep so much and be ready for so much. They need to go magic item shopping, and they're going to go into a dungeon, and they're going to do this and this and this and this, and I need to know everything right from the start. That it's like it's wigging me out. It's psyching me out from actually being able to run this game. And I am grumpy with myself because I need to get the hell over myself.
Yep.
I I I I think we've all been there. Like
hmm
Oh yeah.
I same thing, same story with me too. Is like I've been sick for the past couple of weeks. My wife's been sick, and my players have gone. I haven't streamed my D&D game for a month now,
Mm,
and like I'm like no one's gonna remember what happened last session, and
hmm
it's a reoccurring. I think we all have it, and we all just when it gets closer to the actual date, as long as the people actually show up, yeah,
Yeah. Once you're
you
sitting
can
in the
you'll get by it. Once you're
what?
sitting in the chair, it's gone.
Yeah. Once you're in that
hmm
DM's chair, you'll be all right.
Thanks, you guys. Yes,
You're
that's
welcome.
that's the sort of energy I'm going
That
to
is
take
that
into
is the
this.
grumpy dungeon master pep talk right there.
Gladly, I will take it.
Just sit down, roll some dice. Tell whoever doesn't show up that they got killed by a dragon.
We'll have a grand old time, I'm sure. With that
Yep.
blessing, I have no doubt of it.
All right.
Uh,
So
so
the,
last but
the
not least, you have to add a character trait to Craig.
yep. And
Uh,
I went over Craig with you during the pre warm up show or whatever we call
Mhm.
it. So I'm not going to go over all of it again currently because Craig at this point has so much information behind him that I honestly I can't remember it all. Um,
Well, my addition to Craig is that for 1 week he tumbled through a planar portal and served aboard a pirate ship within the Etherial Expanse,
ooh,
and the
ooh,
name of that ship was the Drake.
the Drake. So Craig, was he a crew member? What was he for the time he was there?
Well, I think he was a stowaway, but they put him to work. They put him to work in the galley.
Okay, so he was a cook or cook's helper at least.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fantastic addition to his slowly growing ridiculous backstory.
To the legend of Craig.
To the legend of Craig.
James, it's been fantastic to have you on. I'm really glad you came out. Hopefully, you can come out again in the future. Any parting words for the DMs out there?
Parting words to any DMs out there: don't stress like I stress. Your games will be brilliant, and your players will love whatever it is you create for them. And if they don't, get better players.
Those are some fantastic words.
Oh, my friends,
All
it is great to have been on the show. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you
right,
for
thank
joining
you.
us.
All right, bye, Craig.
Bye, Craig.
Later, Craig.